Most of us look upon child sacrifice as something out of the ancient history books. Child sacrifice was a ritual killing of children for some purpose, religious, for the weather, success of crops, and other favorable outcomes in the lives of ancient people. Child sacrifice occurred all over the world in places like South America, where the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas practiced it in great volume. Little wonder they disappeared from the face of history. In the Middle East it happened in Gehenna and was practiced by Judean kings Ahaz and Manasseh. We find it in Carthage and Phoenicia, and even in the Mayan culture located in ancient Crete, recognized as the first real civilization in Europe. Child sacrifice has always been a thing. Still, we might ask, why was it so prevalent in the human species? The obvious answer is because babies were defenseless. Best kill them and not the one paying the taxes. This sacrificing of the innocent resulted from the lowest, most base, darkest, and instinctual level of our human nature, the survival instinct. In the Old Testament, Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, was called by God to sacrifice his son Isaac as a test of his faith. Fortunately, God changed his mind, recognizing that Abraham did have enough faith, so he relented, and the Jews later turned an angry eye toward the practice of sacrificing children. The prohibition against child sacrifice is first recorded in Leviticus. You shall not offer any of your offspring for immolation to Molech, thus profaning the name of your God. I am the Lord. Tell the Israelites, anyone, whether an Israelite or an alien residing in Israel, who gives offspring to Molech shall be put to death. The people of the land shall stone that person. In Deuteronomy we discovered a couple more prohibitions. You shall not worship the Lord your God that way, because they offered to their gods every abomination that the Lord detests, even burning their sons and daughters to their gods. Let there not be found among you anyone who causes their son or daughter to pass through the fire, or practices divination, or is a soothsayer, augur, or sorcerer, or who casts spells, consults ghosts and spirits, or seek oracles from the dead. In the postmodern worldview, the idea of the good, that which is best for human potential, is first relativized, and then the malignant narcissism reveals that same lowest, most base, darkest level of our human nature, only this time it is selfishness. Combined with the malignant narcissism as the psychological foundation of the postmodern worldview, use of subjective emotionalism allows for the dehumanization of the child within, leading to the child being sacrificed for the good of the self. In Evangelium Vitae, or The Culture of Life, Pope John Paul II said, quote, "In fact, while the climate of widespread moral uncertainty can in some ways be explained by the multiplicity and gravity of today's social problems, and these can sometimes mitigate the subjective responsibilities of individuals, it is no less true that we are confronted by an even larger reality which can be described as a veritable structure of sin. This reality is characterized by the emergence of a culture which denies solidarity and in many cases takes the form of a veritable culture of death. This culture is actively fostered by powerful cultural, economic, and political currents which encourage an idea of society excessively concerned with efficiency." The question of the good is central to the issue of child sacrifice, As we've evolved as a species, we have managed to back away from this heinous practice by developing an understanding of the good, the philosophical good, the moral good, the ethical good. Let's take a look at what several famous philosophers define as the good. Let us first note that while the postmodern worldview foundation of relativism is a huge consideration in framing the issue of the good, meaning what is good to one person may not be good to another, we may legitimately draw upon the entire history of philosophy to still come to an understanding of its meaning. In the adjective sense, good means to be desired or approved of, and having the qualities of a particular role. As a noun, it means moral right, righteousness, and a benefit or advantage to someone or something. Plato looked upon the good as that which produces happiness, which is, in turn, the highest aim or moral thought, and virtues are required to obtain it. Socrates stated that the good was the ultimate form of truth, that which begets all other forms. Aristotle seemed a bit fuzzy on the good. He called the highest good as the excellent use of intellect, leaving the definition of excellent just as fuzzy. Hume noted that we cannot perceive the good by reason alone, but that it involves sentiments. In general terms, the good refers to conduct that should be preferred when presented with a choice between possible actions. Augustine stated that God was the highest good, and that human good be measured in those terms. Aquinas said that the good is what is desired for true happiness. Jesus taught that God alone was the good. Turning to the postmodernists upon which the postmodern worldview is based, Derrida believed the metaphysical thought of which the good would be included to be hierarchical with an order of subordination. The good thus was simply a concept to be deconstructed. For Foucault, the good fell into the structure of power, and unmasking routes to better forms of power was the only goal. Lyotard, considered the father of postmodernism, did not deal with the concept of the good at all, except as it fell into a grand meta-narrative meant for questioning and rejecting. Of course, those of the postmodern worldview cannot characterize what they do to the unborn as child sacrifice. Who are they sacrificing to? What are they sacrificing for? In philosophical terms, their sacrifice is for their own definition of the good, and anthropologically it is done in the name of their god, Domini Sui, the narcissistic self. Those who adhere to the postmodern worldview do not use the term child sacrifice because it is too cruel to the ear, too mean to the higher part of their fallen human nature. As we live in a culture of death, however, the act is still cultural. Instead, they prefer the term abortion because it implies a simple termination of some unacceptable process to the gods and goddesses of the Domini Sui. To the Christian, human beings are created imago Dei, the image of God, the Creator from whom all goodness flows. Therefore, all human beings are of the good and derive their dignity from God. Christians to this day are still learning this truth, that all human life is sacred, evolving away from wars and persecutions in the name of God to embrace their own goodness. With the knowledge in reaching toward the transcendent, human beings work from their highest, most charitable and loving human nature. Never settling for the fact that abortion is the willful taking of human life, proponents of the postmodern worldview reduce the argument in an attempt to suborn just one piece. My body, my rights. Abortion is health care. Some children are unwanted. Some children are abused. When does human life even begin? What we have here is a graphic of the human life cycle. Where does life begin? I know. At the beginning, conception. The exact moment of conception. When DNA from mother and father is exchanged and mixed. Once the DNA is mixed, this can never be anything but human. This is because science tells us so. My body, my choice. We have a natural law concept of personal autonomy that was eventually understood in Western culture as personal liberty and personal property. However, this was never an unlimited libertarian autonomy that supersedes the greater good. Why, for example, do people who attempt suicide find their way to mental health facilities via judicial authority? Suicide is considered a common law violation in which a person may be adjudicated of unsound mind. So, personal autonomy is not unlimited. Then there is the question of the other body, that of the unborn child with separate and distinct DNA. This DNA informs us that the moment of conception, the zygote and then the fetus will never be anything but a human and should be treated as such. Anything else must be a violation of natural law. Abortion is health care. What is health for the human person? The dictionary defines health as the general condition of the body or mind with reference to soundness and vigor. This is the accepted definition by healthcare professionals and people who think rationally about things. Healthcare is caring for the general condition of the body or mind with reference to soundness and vigor. We should notice, however, that nowhere does the death of an unborn child, somewhere along the beginning of the human life cycle, has anything whatsoever to do with the soundness or vigor of the mind or body. In fact, for women, pregnancy is the highest indication of a woman's health. So no, health care is health care and not abortion. In the Nuremberg trials, jurists decided that they could not try Nazis against American law, British law, French law, or Russian law. They could not try them against German law because the killing of Jews was perfectly legal. They came up with the crimes against humanity, rooted in natural law that ultimately superseded all positive law. Their crimes were against common humanity, the failure of which allowed for the final solution, but also for slavery, genocide, ethnic cleansing, child sacrifice, and the practice of abortion. With regards to this issue, though, the most chilling fact of all, the Holocaust and the German war on the Soviets accounted for 16 million dead. Stalin's Soviet purges accounted for 7 million dead. Mao's Cultural Revolution in China accounted for 20 million dead. Pol Pot's killing fields accounted for 1.7 million dead. All total is approximately 44.7 million dead. Total deaths in the U.S. from abortion alone since Roe v. Wade, 1973, 61.3 million. Abortion is its own culture. As Pope John Paul described it, the culture of death. Those of the postmodern worldview accept this killing as if it were a sacrifice. I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to be burdened. It wasn't my fault. I, me, my, the Domini Sui, the God of the postmodern narcissistic self, accepting the sacrifice of the unborn for self-avoidance, self-denial, maybe even for good weather.